Hi, afternoon. This is Gab Davis, and this is Path to a Perfect 10, a plan to help you upgrade to version 10 of Domino, Notes, Sametime, Traveller, Verse on Premises, all coming out later this year. So I'm Gab Davis. If this is the first time you see the presentation, I'm an admin and an IBM Lifetime Champion for Social Business, and I've worked with these products for 20 some years. So what I want to do in these Perfect 10 sessions is step you through what you need to do to prepare between now and the end of the year or whenever the product ships. So at the moment, this session is on Are We Ready? This is all our pre-preparation evaluation stages, and that involves understanding what we have and how it's being used. So again, we'll start with an audit. This is in a good sense. You need to understand what you have and if people are using it, so you can plan what you need to upgrade. You set the scope of what you want to discover. Last time we looked at Domino. Today we're going to look at Traveller, Sametime, and Webmail. Are they enabled at all? Do you have servers? Who's using the services and how are they using them? So Traveller users, if you think you have a Traveller server, you can go and look at the server document and there is a Traveller tab. If Traveller is enabled on that server, or even if you think it's enabled on that server, see if that Traveller tab is filled in. On the server console, you could do tell Traveller status. That'll report back to you if Traveller is running, how long it's been running. This has been running since January 2nd. The number of users it's servicing, in this case 114. And the last successful sync, this screenshot was taken on the 15th of May, so it was on the 15th of May. And the overall status of the Traveller server, which is green. There's also a yellow status and a red status, which are obviously slightly less unhealthy. If it reports a yellow status or a red status, it will tell you why there's a problem. But we'll deal with that when we're doing our health checks and evaluations later on. So this tells me this is a Traveller server, and currently I have 114 users. That means 114 people actively with devices syncing and connecting to this server. There might be 900 people configured for this server, but they're not active right now. With Traveller, that's fairly unlikely. Usually, if someone's enabled to use Traveller, their device is connected to it most of the time, unless they have it switched off or they're on holiday. So it doesn't tend to be a huge disparity between the number of users and the number of enabled users. So the next question is, are you using high availability or a data store? So Traveller, if you don't configure it for high availability, it keeps all the state databases in a directory called NTSDB, NotesDB, NTSDB, which you'll find under the data directory on the Traveller server. Be very careful with that directory, that's really important. If you get rid of it, all your devices are going to be doing things like prime syncs, which take forever. So the easiest way to check if you've got high availability, and if you're using high availability, you will have moved your data store from that local data store to a DB2 server somewhere. So the easiest way to check is try to open the database, Lotus Traveller.nsf, which will be the root directory of your Traveller server. If you have HA enabled, it will tell you to go away and open the XPages application. It won't actually allow you to open the database and see the information. The other thing you could do is you could just go to the URL of the Traveller server through a browser, lotustraveller.nsf, I'm hoping you're using HTTPS, and log in. And if you have a servers menu when you log in, as I'm showing on the right there, then you have high availability configured. Because at high availability, we have more than one Traveller server, so we'll see multiple servers there. If you don't have high availability, if you've just got a single standalone Traveller server, that servers menu will be missing. In either case, if you go into the users view, you should be able to see a list of all users authorized on the server, whether they're active or not, a list of devices they're authorized to use and using, and when they last synced. This screenshot I'm showing here is from the web interface of Lotus Traveller, and you can see it's configured for iPhone 8 and iPad Pro that were last synced on the 16th of May at around 5:42, 5:51. The next thing, moving on from Traveller, look at Sametime. So one of the things we need to understand, one of the big things that could be an issue with Sametime is understanding what host names your users are configured for in their clients to access the Sametime server. It may be your Sametime server allows people to connect to it using a whole variety of different host names, but the host name the client uses actually determines the community they're in. So a change in host name, if you decide when you upgrade, oh, we don't want to call it im.turtlepartnership.com anymore, we want to change that to chat.turtlepartnership.com. You can actually absolutely do that. It's a DNS change, but that will be seen as a new community and it'll have an empty buddy list. So bear that in mind. One of the things you're going to need to audit is finding out what host names people are using to connect to the Sametime server. And you can only really do that from the client side. You can't see that from the server side for everybody. There's also a database called stlog.nsf on the community server that has views that shows both logins and logouts and user activity via the Notes client. Those views are also available via the web admin interface, but that gives you a really good idea of how many people are logging into your Sametime server and when they're logging in by month, by week, etc. So the Sametime admin client, you can get to it by doing server host name /servlet/auth/admin. The server host name must match what the server is configured for, or you won't be able to log in. Don't try and use the IP number in here because you'll get the login prompt, but it'll fail every time. You have to use the correct host name. So this is the view I was showing you on the previous screen. We've got community logins, logouts, etc. But I'm also showing you monitoring of logins. And what this screen will do is it will update every 30 seconds, showing you the number of people logged in over time. So if you wanted to monitor at a certain time of day, you could monitor activity. For what we're doing for audit purposes, the login, logout information is more useful than this point in time monitoring. So the next thing I want to talk about, travel at the same time, I want to talk about web-based mail. So do you have web-based mail? It may be that you have it and you haven't really configured it. It's very possible that you're using iNotes. It's less possible using Verse on premises without knowing it. You would have had to have done quite a bit of work to configure Verse on premises. Well, not quite a bit, but some work, and you would have noticed doing it. So the first thing to check is, are your servers even configured for HTTP? So if your servers are even configured for HTTP, it's very possible you have iNotes users at least that you may not be aware of, because the default mail template will actually load an iNotes interface if you ask for it through a web browser. So if you've enabled HTTP, you may have users that are accessing their mail files via a browser that you don't know about. So to check if you have HTTP running, do show config server tasks. That's a list of the tasks that start every time the server starts. Sees HTTP listed there. Do show tasks or SHTA. Can you see anything listing on standard ports like 80 or 443? That's a very kind of simplistic way of checking if HTTP is running. We can also go in and check our web configuration. So on the basics tab of our server document, we have a field enabled titled Load Internet Configuration from Server Internet Site Documents. If that is enabled, all of your web configuration will be in the Internet Sites view in the admin client in the configuration screen. Also, if you open names.nsf under the servers twisty, you'll have an Internet Sites view as well. If this is disabled, then all your configuration is inside this actual server document. So if I was to click on Internet Protocols and then Domino Web Engine or HTTP, all of my web configuration is there. If I have SSL configured, if Internet Site Documents are disabled, then I'll find SSL in the server document under Ports, Internet Ports, and here I've got my key file, which I need to enable SSL, orion.kyr, and then underneath that, I'll have the configuration of the actual HTTP ports. In this case, although I'm listening on port 80, I'm redirecting all traffic that comes into that port to SSL, and I've enabled SSL on port 443. That same information, if I have Internet Site Documents enabled, will be found under an internet site document. So the internet sites view, there'll be a document there. This one's called Website Orion HTTP. And on the security tab, I have very much the same settings. Redirect to SSL, whether I'm going to allow anonymous access, name and password, and the key file name. So that's a very quick way of me just checking whether I have HTTP enabled. Bear in mind, if you're using internet site documents, you can only connect to the server using the host name defined on that basics tab in the internet site document. If I use any other host name or even the IP address, even though they might be right, the server won't answer. Internet site documents are really secure. We like them because they're opt-in security. Without internet site documents, if someone just loads HTTP on my Domino server, I'm just listening on port 80, even though I might not have configured it or even want to. With internet site documents, I must have explicitly said how I want people to connect to this server. Little side tool there, but worth mentioning, I think. So the last thing I want to do is, do you have Verse on premises installed? So the very, very simplest way of checking this is go to the host name configured for HTTP for your server, found in the configuration settings we've already seen, either in the server document or the internet site document, and type the host name, hopefully HTTPS, hostname /verse. And that should give you the Verse login screen and load Verse. If what you get when you log in is a 404 file not found error, you don't have Verse installed on the server or configured. There are plenty of other things you can check. There are specific design elements that need to be in the mail files. Lots more things you can check, but this is kind of a very quick way for us to check. If in doubt, look at the IBM documentation for the design elements that should be in the files, or look at your internet site document under the HTTP configuration for what traffic's allowed as well. I want to talk, in the previous session we talked about activity trends and configuring activity trends to monitor Notes user activity, but we can also configure activity trends to monitor HTTP session, including iNotes and Verse on premises. Domino HTTP tracking reports on the host name of the server, the name of the logged in user accessing the server, and the URL the server selects. So again, it's not very sophisticated. This is more useful if you look at applications. But if you want to know, let's say I've got HTTP running my server and I have no idea if anyone's using it to access their mail files, I could use this to actually track if people are logging in and accessing their mail files this way. You can also obviously use the server-based HTTP login, but that tends to be quite big and cumbersome to make your way through. You can either have a domlog.nsf database, which can get very big, or you can have local log files. But if what we're doing is just auditing who's using this service and what they're using it for and when, I think activity trends is a better way to go. So again, from yesterday, it will take about, it's configured in the server configuration document. It will take at least 24 hours to start gathering data. The activity trends database can get huge, so don't turn it on permanently. And what I've done here under activity logging, I'm just choosing Domino HTTP to track. Don't track everything, just track the thing you're looking to audit. So where are we at the end of this very fast-paced session? You should at least be able to find out if you have Travelers, Sametime, iNotes, or Verse on-premise servers and identifying who is using them. One thing I didn't mention, which I should with Sametime, the server document on the basics tab of the server document, there is a field saying, is this a Sametime server? And that is set to yes if it's a Sametime server. Now, full disclosure, I can see it set to yes when it's not a Sametime server, but that's also a good thing that you can check if you're not sure which Sametime servers you might have. Just look at the basics tabs, those server documents. So in a later session, I want to take you through reviewing the installations and whether they should be upgraded before version 10 arrives. And the health of the installations, things that you can do in preparation for version 10 that will make your upgrade more seamless. So next up, we'll be continuing on with Are We Ready? And looking at auditing and reviewing the use of the IBM Notes client. And after that, we'll be looking at system requirements. What are our servers currently running? Or are we in a good position to be able to upgrade later this year? Thank you very much. As always, Any feedback is appreciated. I hope you found the session useful.